All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Mayfield. I'm so glad you're here with us at AuggieCon today. Now, our next presenter is no stranger to Auggie. Melanie is a former director, a longtime foreign moderator, and volunteer. She manages the annual salary survey, which begins in the summer and culminates in the September issue of Auggie World. She has spent her professional career in the world of facilities management and has parlayed that expertise into her current role at ROI Consulting Group, where she specializes in tech solutions, recommendations, implementation, and support. Today, in her session titled Digital Twin from the Owner's Perspective, Melanie will discuss model integration on various platforms and exactly how owners are using your models. You've read her salary survey in Auggie World, and you've followed her on her CAD-centric blog, Mistress of the Dorkness, for years. It's my pleasure to introduce one of Auggie's favorite members and my good friend, Melanie Stone.
Thank you, Frank. I am so very happy to be here. Um, as Frank said, I work in facility management, and we tend to be talked about more than we are listened to. So, a little bit of background. Um, I started my career working in the engineering department of a 6 million square foot hospital and later went on to consult with the other 6+ million square feet of all our family hospitals. So that was mainly focused on MEPFP facilities engineering, working with maintenance staff, engineering staff, and our consulting firms that did renovations for us. After that, I became a facility management system administrator. Um, I'm referring to that mainly as IWMS, but I'll get into my acronym annoyance later. There, I worked with security, leasing administration, portfolio planning, etc. Since then, I've been a consultant. I've worked with hundreds of owners around the world, getting their digital information to be cohesive and useful for their actual end users. And their actual end users are never going to see a Revit model. They're just not. Loads of people will benefit from your fantastic design information through the life cycle of this building, but it will be curated for them by these subject matter experts who hold your documentation. Ideally, that would be some sort of document controller, CAD BIM manager, something of that sort, but it could also be an engineer. It could be a real estate manager. It could even be some IT managers hold a lot of information in AutoCAD and Revit for their clients. So if you'd like to find out more about some of the work that I've done, you can use this QR code here, which goes to a page on my blog where I link to past discussions that I've presented. So this presentation is actually a combination of 3 different presentations I've already done. So if you would like to see those presentations in
Hey,
whole,
Melanie, real quick, are you sharing your screen?
I am not.
Sweet,
It
just making
looks like
sure
I'm
you
sharing my screen.
you flash your QR code, but I didn't see it
Okay, yes, that's that green giant button you guys were telling me about.
for
Thank
sure.
you.
No
Thanks
problem.
for
Thank
being
you.
the backup moderator,
Yeah, you got it.
Eric. You're
Oh,
on,
I was
Melanie.
just so excited to talk about facilities. You know how I get. Okay, so let's go through those slides again. This is the QR code I was referencing. So over my time with hundreds of clients, I've dealt with all sorts of facilities. Um, Medical, financial institutions, some pharmaceutical laboratories, some nuclear facilities, some social media giants in Silicon Valley, um, global banking institutions. So when I give examples about things that I've seen, it's coming from a wide variety of industries. It's not just one company that I worked at. But there are certain trends that happen over and over to all of my clients. And I would like to provide that perspective to you all so you understand why when we ask for something that you may not understand why we ask for it, or you may think we want something different. Um, with a little bit of perspective, you might understand why we ask for certain things. All right, and of course, it's the marketing that exhausts me. Everybody says, "Oh, the owner needs digital twin. The owner needs digital twin," and I'm like, "Do we?" I've worked on some digital twin projects in the past few years in conjunction with Autodesk and Aptura, and our clients were very happy with those things. But they had very specific use cases that made use of what they were considering digital twin. But I want to take a step back and take a more holistic look at facility management uh, before we really can draw a conclusion on whether or not a specific client would benefit from digital twin. So first, I'd like to talk about who the owner actually is, because when someone says owner, they probably got an idea in their head of maybe the project manager they talk to, maybe the facilities guys they do a walkthrough with. But there are a lot of people represented on the owner side. Next, I will discuss an IWMS. Was previously referred to as a CAFM system, computer-aided facility management. Um, prior to that, it was FIM, facility information management. There are loads of acronyms that are used to describe database and application structure. My microphone just changed. Hold on. Sorry. The IWMS, or Integrated Workplace Management System, is a database holding all your information and an application that the users are going to interact with.
We can't
Next,
hear
we'll
you.
talk about, really?
I could tell you were so passionate.
How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. I'm really irritated because I bought a new headset just for this presentation. Okay, the Integrated Workplace Management System is the database which holds all the information about a facility with an application on top that users actually interact with. Next, we'll talk about project closeout, the mistakes that we see the AC side make for us as owners, and then mistakes that I have seen owners make. And then finally, we'll discuss our question of where does digital twin fit into your client's needs. All right, so I have two slides for this, but if you download the handout that comes with my class, I do go into a little bit more detail on each of these. So this first slide is talking about who you might think of as the owner when it comes to who's the client. And that's correct because they are your client. But when we're talking about digital twin and electronic documentation, they're not really your client. That's on the next page. So this is going to be things like your project manager. They may or may not have AEC experience. They may not bother talking to the FM. The good project managers do, but they just basically want to keep their project on time and on budget. For the finance departments, they get a lot of requests for funding, and most facility owners have something that makes them money. Design and renovation projects don't make them money. Facilities doesn't make them money. So there was a lot of competition for projects, and they just want you to give them a really accurate scope and price. And they close out within a certain budgetary year, which is going to become important later on mistakes owners make. Next is the occupant. In some specialty areas like hospitals, laboratories, manufacturing facilities, there will be a need for the design team to really talk to that occupant to make sure they've got everything they need to complete the work and to complete the work safely, and just a lot of ergonomic equipment, room layouts, that kind of thing. So you might spend time with them on some projects and you might not. And of course, real estate, who is planning for how many people they need to accommodate and that type of thing. Next is the cool kids. So we talked about the document controller. Hopefully that facility owner's document controller has a good relationship with the project management team and works on scope and spec with them. Uh, the engineering team is going to be making any material standards and specifications, that you can only use certain types of drop ceilings, you have to use medical grade piping, those types of things. And very often we find our clients include their electronic deliverable standard in with those engineering standards and specs because they're very important to the facilities team. In the lower left, we have operations administration. That could be the people who are, maybe they're running a help desk that takes in trouble calls from all of their occupants and inputs them into their IWMS. Or you might also call that a CMMS, computerized maintenance management system. And they would be needing information on the space and equipment on the first day of business to ingest it into their IWMS so they can start getting those work orders in and building equipment history from the first day that they're actually using that building. And then, of course, we have our maintenance staff, the people who actually get out there and keep everything running. They benefit very highly from good MEP information in our electronic deliverables, but they're probably not looking at it in Revit. They may not even be looking at it in AutoCAD. They'll be looking at it in their IWMS or maybe through a viewing program that is set up that they can access from their computer or tablets. There are also other owners who do benefit from your information. It doesn't just stop at this team. There is IT systems, telecommunications, could be key control, security, environmental health and safety, clinical engineering, employee health initiatives, entertainment, booking and reservations, meetings and events. There are so many people who are getting information that started from your construction documents, just spread out over time, that they use in a lot of different functions in different areas of the business. So you can see why it's so important to have documentation, because there are just countless people who will eventually interact with it. Okay, next up, what is an IWMS? This is the backbone of a facilities team. This is where they keep their space information. This is where they keep their maintenance information, their corrective maintenance, their planned maintenance, managing all their leases, managing all their different conference room configurations. There's, it's very complex systems. So when it comes down to a facilities budget and you look at your Autodesk software and you look at your IWMS software, this is where the owners are dropping the money, because that is what has the biggest impact to their bottom line. So when I say electronic deliverables, I can mean tabular format for maybe some of the equipment information, and of course, operations and maintenance spec manuals. But the formats that people need for their IWMS are literally Revit and AutoCAD. That's it. Autodesk has completely cornered the market in that the software plugins for these various IWMS only install on full AutoCAD and full Revit, not Revit LT, not AutoCAD LT, etc. And I think that's You may not understand why, or you may say, oh, it's wrong for one vendor to do this, but that's the owners do not have a choice. The owners have to have this information in one of these two programs in order to connect it to their database and not have to reinvent the wheel and manually redo all this stuff. And I do have another QR code here. I wrote an article on how much people in the industry annoy with all of these different acronyms that people use for facility management programs. I think the most recent one is CPIP, and I can't remember what that is offhand. But if you would like to see a reference list of the different names that we as owners or software vendors call our IWMS system, please feel free to check out this list if you want to make sense of some of that. Now, I wanted to give you just an example of some common integrated workplace management systems, because there are a ton out there. Some are very specialized. Some only handle asset management. Some only handle lease management. Some only handle reservations for conference rooms and or hoteling and hot desking. Some focus purely on maintenance. But I tried to make a selection here of multidisciplinary IWMS that your largest clients are probably using. Now, I do have, behind every IWMS, I do have a date of their founding. I love technology. There's so much that we can do. You've seen the presenters here, AuggieCon, and they are making the most of their tech. They want to help you make the most of your tech. But with owners, I would like to stress that this is such a huge investment for most owners to set up an IWMS. It could be in the millions of dollars to purchase the software and server if they're self-hosting and do all these creation of collecting of the background metadata to make their systems function, to customize the system so it's user friendly and contains precisely the information they need. This doesn't happen quickly. The first IWMS implementation that I participated in as a client started, I think, approximately 5 years before it was finished. So I hesitate as a consultant to recommend new technologies because by the end of that 5 years, after you go through selection, contract writing, begging finance for money, getting the contracts written up and beginning the project, in those years, a lot of new software products just get sunset. They were tried for a couple years and then let go. I'm not naming any names here, but some folks might be able to guess a couple of them that I was upset by, and they were facility management related. So Archibus 1983, I'm currently an Archibus business partner, and I've been using Archibus for off and on over 15 years. Aptura has acquired a lot of various platforms, and they're putting together some sort of mid-range products, so not as complex as Archibus. Those are great, but everybody on here has been a software platform for over 20 years, closer to 40 in most cases. So just something to keep in mind that we're working with well-established systems that owners have invested a lot of resources into. All right. Now for the next portion of our presentation, mistakes during handover. Number one, first and foremost, myself as a client, most of my other clients over the years, they're not getting editable electronic deliverables at the end of the project, even when they were spec'd at the beginning. Hands down, that is the single biggest issue of trying to get owners excited about BIM or digital twin or whatever we're calling it this week. We're not going to get excited about digital twin or any other new technologies the design side is trying to sell us purely for the fact that we've spent the past 20, 30, 40 years wanting editable documents at the end of a renovation or new construction and not getting them. So digging in a little bit more, and again, I do go into further detail in my handout. If you would rather read this than listen to me rant, totally understandable. Number one, ignoring deliverable closeout until the end of the project. We understand on the design side, you've got certain people involved in bidding and speccing and things like that. And sometimes I hear from my colleagues in the AC industry, they didn't even know a client had BIM standards until they sent a CD or digital download out and it was rejected by the client. And they're like, what? So there could be more communication on that side too. Attempting to turn over non-editable documentation when it was spec'd, or attempting to turn over partial documentation. I've got a few examples, but one of my favorites for partial documentation was I was working on closing out a first-class cancer center, 600,000 square feet, big, beautiful building, lots of rich people's names around it. And when we're like, we don't have any structural drawings for this, and we're hounding the team, and we finally get structural drawings, and they're demanding closeout, but we look at the drawings, and it was details of a single stairwell. Nothing for the rest of the building. Uh, so that was worth a good laugh. And there are understandable things like markups being delayed. We get it, like you have new projects, you don't have enough staff. Your priority levels are the projects that are due next, and getting those record drawings or as-built finished for a client that is already occupying a building isn't a priority for those teams. And unfortunately, we totally understand that. Let's skip to not asking clarifying questions. If you do have your standards and specifications, and you do have your contract, your RFPs saying electronic deliverables will be handed over at the end of the project, there might be some details in there that you just don't get. I was pulled into a conversation a couple years ago from one guy saying, oh, the client wants us to put room bounding on these cubicles and attach information to like a room, but there's already desks there. So I'm just going to attach the information to the desk. But that's not the way our IWMS works. Unfortunately, our IWMS does need room bounding for cubicles because there needs to be individual room records in that final database, because we're going to assign people to that room. We're going to assign assets to that room. We're going to make that room reservable. We're going to have maintenance done on that room, telecommunication tickets done on that room. So unfortunately, as tedious as it is, we really do need room bounding for cubicles for most clients. There are some that do team setups where everybody shares a space that it wouldn't be as important. But the fact is, talk to your client to see why they need something before you suggest an alternative that may not work for them. And you could end up coming to some sort of agreement between the two of you that is a halfway point. You never know unless you ask. Let's see. There are also people that just don't want to share files. Like the company's fine with it, but the actual person who has the files is like, no, 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 this is my life's work. You can't touch it. But I guarantee your clients are not making money off of your AutoCAD blocks or your Revit families. They're holding them in an archive and using them on the next project, which is going to be 5 or 10 years down the line when your new families are going to be way better anyway. The only people stealing your families are your current employees. So the biggest issue is just not getting electronic deliverables that we can actually edit at the end is the main takeaway. And until you overcome that distrust with your client, because the client has been experiencing that globally for decades, they're not going to want to buy into new technologies you're trying to sell them. Also, in my handout, I do have a link to a presentation by Craig Dubler at Penn State. He has a really good presentation where he talks through some of the information I've mentioned here, but he also gives a lot of good prompting questions for AEC firms that want to do good BIM and FM deliverables and build that relationship better with their clients. So if you want to check out that link for you AEC firms who want to make those conversations easier, I definitely recommend that. Oh, and I decided to throw in this diagram. It is from the National Institute of Science Technology. They did a study, I think it was probably over 20 years ago now, but it was trying to establish the costs of lack of interoperability, how much it costs us as owners over the lifetime of the building, just to highlight the fact that so little of the building life cycle is the construction phase, very tiny part. Most of it is our operations phase. Okay, next up is the mistakes that we as owners make. So advice for owners on how to improve things or close up holes, advice for AEC firms, things to be on the lookout and to be aware of. The mistake that makes me laugh the most is outsourcing your facilities CAD and BIM standards, because normally they just hire an architectural firm who uses their own CAD standards. It's very focused on printed output. A lot of time is wasted on annotation, and that's not really something that most facility owners care about, because they're just going to archive your project and paste things together and make it look the way they want to look. We don't want dimensions on things because we want to zoom in, take a screenshot, and email it to someone. You know, it's having the actual text on plans is not important to us. And that's not the way we tend to use things in its final form. And it also completely excludes MEPFP systems. So I have consulted with quite a few firms on making better CAD standards. Make it a good, clean, understandable checklist of the things that are most important to you. And if it's not important to you, it shouldn't be in your CAD standard. I mentioned PMs earlier. Project managers can sometimes contradict facility managers. I may have my spec book laid out perfectly with my materials and my electronic deliverables, but the PM could put together an overall spec or RFP that says something different about electronic deliverables. And it could conflict. So if you're a PM or you know some PMs, please take the time to have the people who wrote your BIM standards take a look at your final documentation before it goes out to your AEC firms to make sure nothing is contradictory and they're not wasting time doing something the owner doesn't actually need. When it comes to premature closeout, I mentioned the finance team. And unfortunately, most building owners, they have to live and die by their fiscal year. They have to spend money by a certain time. Our busiest time of the year as consultants is the very tail end of the year because they have a teeny tiny bit of money, and if they don't spend it, they won't get it for the next year. So we do a ton of projects in November and December, making sure that fiscal year is absolutely maximized for our clients. The downside is sometimes they close out construction projects without having received those deliverables. There's a delay getting markups because the design team was busy. They go ahead and pay the consultants, and then the consultants have zero motivation whatsoever to actually finish those markups. The bidding process. As someone who worked in engineering, our MEPFP people were absolutely excellent. The local firms who serviced our facilities, because we had really old buildings from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 80s. They were older technology than what is currently being used in design. So having these specialty MEP firms who understood what they were already working with was invaluable. And those guys don't always know how to do BIM. they're the ones we need building the facility, but they're not the ones we need creating the documentation. So when we're bidding and we pick the best people for the job, BIM is hardly ever going to factor into that. Another obstacle I've seen some owners have is they're moving from a facility that they've been managing in paper and CAD, and they're moving to a new campus that is entirely BIM. So that is the point at which they're going to switch technologies. Great, except they can't hire that BIM manager to manage that and be the document controller and make those BIM standards until they're actually in the final facility where a BIM manager would actually be needed. They just can't get that head count in the current building because there is no BIM for them to manage. I've actually seen that at 2 facilities so far. So if it's happened there, I'm sure it's happened uh, more than that. And the decision about a BIM execution plan. Like, are you making sure that your whole design team is using a BIM execution plan? Are they on the same page? Do you leave it up to them? Do you try and do it yourself? That's a huge question, and I've seen it go wrong and go right in both directions. It depends completely on the facility and on the design team. And finally, one of the issues that I've seen with clients, it's usually due to manpower limitations. They probably only got one document controller for tens of millions of square feet, um, and they don't check the documents at each phase. The most successful BIM implementations I've heard about from others is they were very involved up front and they were able to see those electronic documentation, at each project phase. So it wasn't at closeout and commissioning the first time they see those. Um, I think that is such a great way to have these conversations sooner in the process when something can be done about it. But a lot of owners just don't allot enough manpower for that. Okay, great. I was worried about timing because I tend to go on a bit long. So we are to key takeaways. Is digital twin the biggest issue for facility document controllers and facility owner operators today? No, the same issue has always been the same. And that is lack of editable documentation that they can carry on and maintain the facility with. Because these facilities are going to be around longer than you, longer than me, longer than the design firms you currently work for. It's going to get bought out, it's going to get closed down. But that building is going to still continue operating with some version of the original documents. The facility I worked at the longest, we had documents from the 1920s that I had scanned and digitized, and they started out paper, they moved to CAD, they eventually were modeled in Revit, and those people who designed that in the 1920s obviously are long gone. That's over 100 years ago now. And just knowing that the client has something they can keep up to date through whatever means. Um, they might conduct visual surveys, they might hire an outside firm to do periodic surveys to keep their documentation up to date. They may depend on their maintenance staff to do napkin sketches. They see that a valve was supposed to be on this side of the hallway is on this side of the hallway. They write that down, they take it to the engineering team or document controller to keep that up to date. And the circle of life continues. Our second key takeaway is the integrated workplace management system is what that facility lives and dies by. There are a lot of drivers to have collaboration websites, great during the project. That is not a deliverable for owners. We get a lot of very, very torqued off owners who thought that they had models because these collaboration websites allowed them to log in and look at the equipment and look at these beautiful, pretty models. But when it came to the files behind that, none of them were editable. And what we end up having to do in that case after contracts have ended and companies have closed is we have to take their final PDF documentation and redraw it in AutoCAD. And that is the vision of BIM that they were sold versus the vision of BIM that they received. And that happens over and over. So be sure when you are signing up owners and advertising BIM or digital twin to them, that you have conversations, expectation setting about what they will get at the end and what they will be able to maintain. Because most of these collaboration websites are not set up to maintain a building. They're set up for a finite time for people to collaborate together during a project. And that is not what the owner needs. And of course, project closeout, the owners should get what they pay for, and communication should happen early in a project so that everybody is on the same page. I will open it up for Q&A, but before we get there, I do want to say there are some things you should never say to an owner. Don't tell an owner, we should trust you, a single company, to keep all of our models updated in a cloud service. I've never seen that end well. It's there's loads of reasons why that would never work and should never work. And most importantly, we should just give the owners less information because they said they're going to clean it up before they use it. No, don't say that to owners. Since the dawn of time, owners have been maintaining buildings with construction documents. Whether those construction documents were paper, whether they were CAD, whether they are BIM, the owners have always taken the same things the builders built with and used that to maintain their facilities. Yes, we can get into specifics about data mapping and getting individual discrete pieces of data to go to the right place. But overall, what you use to build the building is what they need to maintain the building. They don't need it curated down to just no details. Give them the whole package. They can archive it, have it for reference, and then take from it what they will to actually maintain their facility over time. And of course, I recommend the Augie Facility Management in Practice Forum. I have the URL up here as well as a QR code. This forum does not have a ton of activity, but all of the things that the owners are discussing in there are pretty timeless topics. So if you want to hear what we are doing owner side, or if you have any questions that you go talk to your clients or your AC firms and you want to have an ongoing conversation with us, please always feel free to go to this forum and ask questions, answer questions, read some of the archives, and more communication is great. I do see some comments. I'm trying to, let's see. As a Revit user, if I want to learn how to interact with an IWMS, which platform would you recommend I start with? Oh, that is a tough one because IWMS are so expensive that you're not going to get like free trials. I think it depends. Is there something like, are you in a specific industry? And some industries gravitate more, some more toward Archibus, some more toward Maximo. If you ask your clients what they're using, that might be helpful. And if you can, check with local universities or community colleges. I don't think community colleges are quite as likely. My boss is a guest lecturer at Pratt University, and they do learn about IWMS there. But I don't think I ever saw that at my community college. So maybe if you check a university, you might be able to take or audit some classes that would give you more background information. Personally, Archibus is my favorite just because it's been around so long, but it is extremely complex. If Autodesk had not brutally unalived BIM 360 Ops, I would recommend that. maybe Tandem might be a place to get your feet wet. I don't know any facilities actually using Tandem for maintenance, but it does have some of the same structures that BIM 360 Ops had, where you can set up equipment and attributes to at least get you used to the data side.